I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd fall in love on a farm. I grew up in Seattle, spent my 20s working tech jobs in climate-controlled offices, drinking overpriced lattes, and dating apps were my primary source of human connection. But when my Aunt Marianne called me last spring, her voice tight with worry, asking if I could come help her run the farm for the summer while she recovered from hip surgery, I said yes without thinking. Maybe I needed the escape. Maybe I was tired of staring at screens. Or maybe some part of me knew that everything was about to change. The farm was in eastern Washington, 3 hours from anything resembling a city. Rolling hills, endless sky, and a kind of quiet that made my ears ring for the first few days. Aunt Marianne had a small operation, mostly vegetables and some chickens, but it was more work than I'd imagined. She'd hired a farmhand for the season, someone local who knew the land and could teach me the ropes. That's how I met Caspian. He was already there when I arrived, working in the field closest to the house. I saw him from a distance first, just a figure moving through the rows of young corn, and even from far away, there was something about the way he moved that made me watch longer than I should have. Confident. Easy. Like he belonged to the earth itself. When I walked down to introduce myself, he straightened up and turned toward me, and I got my first real look at him. He was maybe a year or two younger than me, late 20s, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his temples where sweat had dampened it. His eyes were this striking grey-green, like storm clouds over grass. He wiped his hand on his jeans before offering it to me. "You must be Marianne's nephew," he said. His voice was low and warm, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't quite place. "I'm Caspian. Welcome to the middle of nowhere." His hand was calloused and strong, and I held it a second too long before letting go. "Thanks. I'm David. I should warn you, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing." He smiled at that, and something in my chest tightened. "That's all right. I'll teach you. It's not as complicated as it seems. Just takes patience." Those first few days were a blur of learning. Caspian was patient, like he'd promised, walking me through everything from irrigation systems to recognizing when tomatoes were ready to harvest. He had this way of explaining things that made even the most mundane tasks feel important. He'd crouch down next to a plant and talk about it like it was a living thing he respected, not just a crop. I found myself watching his hands as he worked, the way his fingers moved through soil, gentle and sure. We fell into a routine. We fell. Early mornings, we'd start with the chickens, then move through the various fields, checking for pests, adjusting watering schedules, harvesting whatever was ready. The work was physical in a way my body wasn't used to, and I'd collapse into bed each night with muscles screaming. But there was something satisfying about it too. Something real. Caspian usually brought lunch for both of us, simple stuff he'd pack in the morning. We'd sit in the shade of the old barn and eat. And that's when I started to really know him. He'd grown up about 20 miles away, had been working farms since he was 14. His parents had immigrated from somewhere in Eastern Europe before he was born, which explained the slight accent that only appeared on certain words. He was saving money, had plans to eventually buy his own land. "Why farming?" I asked him one day, genuinely curious. "It's so much work it can't be the most lucrative thing." He'd looked at me with those grey-green eyes, considering his answer. "It's honest work. You put something in the ground, you take care of it, and it grows. There's a truth to that, a fairness. The land doesn't lie to you." He paused, pulling a piece of grass and twisting it between his fingers. "And I like the quiet, the space to think. You can't really be dishonest with yourself out here. There's too much silence." I thought about that a lot in the days that followed. the silence, the honesty. I was starting to understand what he meant. It was about 3 weeks in when the incident at the water trough happened. We'd been working in the far field all morning, and it was brutally hot, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer. We were both filthy, covered in dust and sweat. And when we made it back to the barn area, Caspian headed straight for the old stone water trough near the animal pens. "Come on," he called back to me. "You look like you're about to pass out." The trough was fed by a pump, cold well water that felt like heaven in the heat. Caspian had his head under the stream, water running through his hair and down his neck, soaking his shirt. When he came up, he shook his head like a dog, water flying everywhere. And I laughed. "Real mature," I said. But I was already heading for the pump myself. I bent over the trough, cupping water in my hands and splashing it on my face and neck. The cold was shocking and perfect. I was so focused on the relief of it that I didn't notice Caspian had moved closer until suddenly there was water hitting me from the side, a huge splash that soaked my entire shoulder and chest. I spun around, sputtering. "What the hell?" He was grinning, actually grinning, with this mischievous look I'd never seen on him before. "You said it was immature." Figured I'd commit to it. Without thinking, I scooped up a handful of water and flung it back at him. It hit him square in the face, and his expression of shock was so perfect that I started laughing, really laughing, harder than I had in months. And then we were both doing it, splashing each other like kids, water flying everywhere, both of us laughing and slipping on the wet ground. I don't know exactly how it happened. I was reaching for another handful of water when my boot hit a slick patch of mud. My feet went out from under me and I was falling backward, arms windmilling uselessly. I had just enough time to think about how much hitting the ground was going to hurt when suddenly there were hands on me, strong hands grabbing my arm and wrapping around my waist, and then I was being pulled forward instead of falling back. I crashed into Caspian's chest, his arms tight around me, steadying me. For a second, we just stood there, both breathing hard, water dripping off us, his hands still gripping my waist and my hands clutching his shoulders. I could feel his heart beating, fast and strong, could feel the heat of him through our wet shirts. We were so close I could see the individual drops of water on his eyelashes, could smell the mix of sun and sweat and something else, something that was just him. His eyes met mine, and something passed between us. Something I felt in my chest, in my stomach, in every nerve ending. His grip on my waist tightened slightly, his fingers pressing into my sides, and I realized I was leaning into him, toward him, and he wasn't moving away. "You okay?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual, a little rough. I should have stepped back, should have laughed it off and put distance between us. Instead, I heard myself say, "Yeah, thanks for catching me." "Any time," he said, and the way he said it made my mouth go dry. We stayed like that for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few seconds. Then Caspian cleared his throat and loosened his hold, and I stepped back. My legs unsteady, for reasons that had nothing to do with almost falling. He ran a hand through his wet hair, not quite meeting my eyes. "We should probably get back to work," he said. "Yeah, definitely." But everything had changed. Or maybe nothing had changed. And I was just finally admitting what I'd been feeling for weeks. As we walked back toward the fields, I couldn't stop thinking about his hands on my waist, the solid warmth of his chest, the way he'd looked at me, the way I'd wanted to close that last inch of distance between us and find out what his mouth tasted like. That night, I lay in bed and forced myself to think clearly. I was attracted to Caspian. That much was obvious now, undeniable. I'd dated women in the past, had relationships that were fine, comfortable, but never quite right in a way I couldn't articulate. And I'd noticed men before. In that vague way you notice attractive people. But I'd always pushed it aside, told myself it didn't mean anything. But this was different. This was specific and intense and impossible to ignore. This was Caspian's laugh and his hands in the soil and the way he said my name. This was me lying awake at night thinking about him, wanting him in a way that felt both terrifying and inevitable. The next few days were torture. I was hyper-aware of every interaction, every accidental touch, every moment we were close. Caspian seemed different too, more careful around me, like he was also thinking about what had happened at the trough. We'd be working side by side, and I'd catch him looking at me, and when our eyes met, he'd glance away, quickly, a slight flush on his cheeks. One evening, about a week after the incident, we were finishing up for the day, putting tools away in the barn. The sun was setting, golden light streaming through the gaps in the walls, and dust motes floated in the air like tiny stars. I was coiling up a hose when Caspian spoke from behind me. "David, can I ask you something?" I turned. He was standing a few feet away, his expression serious, almost nervous. "Sure, anything." He hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. "That day at the trough, when you almost fell, did you feel—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Never mind. Forget I said anything." "No," I said quickly. "Don't do that. Ask me." He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him wrestling with something. Finally, he said, "Did you feel what I felt?" My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. This was it. The moment where I could be honest, or I could lie and keep everything safe and unchanged. I thought about what he'd said about the farm, about how the silence out here made it impossible to be dishonest with yourself. "Yes," I said. I felt it. The relief on his face was immediate and obvious. He took a step closer. I've been going crazy trying to figure out if I was imagining it. If I was reading something into nothing because I wanted... He stopped, laughed a little. "I'm not good at this. At talking about this stuff." "Me neither," I admitted. "I'm pretty new to even admitting it to myself." "That you're attracted to men. That I'm attracted to you," I corrected. "Specifically. Overwhelmingly. Inconveniently." He smiled at that, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Inconveniently? You're my aunt's employee. I'm only here for the summer. And I have no idea what I'm doing, in general, with any of this." I gestured vaguely between us. "But yeah, I can't stop thinking about you. About that moment when you caught me. About how much I wanted to kiss you." "Wanted?" he asked, taking another step closer. "Past tense." "Want," I corrected, my voice barely above a whisper. "Present tense." He closed the distance between us slowly, giving me plenty of time to change my mind, to step back. But I didn't move. When he was close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him, he lifted one hand and gently touched my face, his thumb brushing along my jaw. The tenderness of it made my breath catch. "I've never done this before," he said quietly. "Been with a man, I mean. I've known for years that I was attracted to guys, but in a small town, you learn to keep that kind of thing to yourself. It's easier to just not act on it. But then you showed up. And from the first day, I couldn't stop thinking about you. Couldn't stop wanting to touch you, to know what it would feel like." "And what does it feel like?" I asked, leaning into his hand. "Like I've been waiting my whole life for this," he said, and then he kissed me. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of us figuring it out as we went. His lips were soft and warm, and when he deepened the kiss, his other hand came up to cradle the back of my head, fingers threading through my hair. I gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, and felt him make a small sound against my mouth that sent heat racing through my entire body. We kissed until we were both breathless, until the barn had gone dark around us, and the only light was the last purple glow of sunset through the cracks in the walls. When we finally pulled apart, Caspian rested his forehead against mine, both of us breathing hard. "Stay with me tonight," he said. "I have a small place on the other side of the property. Stay with me." I didn't even hesitate. "Okay." His place was a small cottage, probably originally built for farmhands, with one main room that served as kitchen and living space, and a small bedroom. It was sparse but clean, with books stacked on a makeshift shelf and a guitar leaning in the corner. He lit an oil lamp since the electricity was temperamental, and in the soft golden light, we stood in the middle of the room and just looked at each other. "I don't know the rules for this," I admitted. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." "I don't think there are rules," Caspian said. He reached for my hand, lacing our fingers together. "I think we just figure it out as we go. Together." We spent that night learning each other. Every touch was a discovery, every kiss a revelation. He was patient and attentive, checking in with me, making sure I was okay. And I tried to do the same for him. It was clumsy at times, and we laughed about it, and that made it better somehow. More real. More us. When we finally fell asleep, tangled up in his narrow bed, his arm around my waist and my head on his chest, I felt a kind of peace I'd never experienced before, a sense of rightness that I didn't know was possible. The next morning, we woke early out of habit, and for a moment I panicked, wondering if everything would be awkward now, if we'd made a mistake. But then Caspian kissed my shoulder and said, "Good morning," in that low, sleep-rough voice. And I relaxed into him. We still had work to do, so we got dressed and headed out to start the day. But everything felt different now. Better. We worked side by side like always. But now there were casual touches. His hand on my lower back as he moved past me. My fingers brushing his when we both reached for the same tool. And the way he looked at me, open and warm and full of something that made my heart race. Over the following weeks, we fell into a new rhythm. During the day, we worked the farm, and to anyone watching, we probably looked like exactly what we were supposed to be, an owner's nephew and a hired hand doing their jobs. But in the evenings, after the work was done, I'd go to his cottage, and we'd make dinner together, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories, each other's bodies, each other's hearts. Caspian told me about growing up different in a small town, about knowing from a young age that he liked boys but not having words for it, not having anyone to talk to about it, about the loneliness of keeping that part of himself hidden. I told him about my own journey, about the relationships with women that never quite fit, about the vague sense I'd always had that something was missing or wrong with me, about how being with him felt like finally understanding myself. "You're not going back to Seattle at the end of summer, are you?" he asked me one night. We were lying in his bed, the window open to let in the cool night air, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my chest. I'd been trying not to think about it, about the fact that this had an expiration date. I told my aunt I'd stay until she was fully recovered. That's the plan. That's not what I asked. I was quiet for a moment, staring up at the ceiling. I don't know what I'm going back to. My apartment, my job. They all feel like someone else's life now. But I can't just stay here forever. Can I? Why not? He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at me. I mean, I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a couple months. But David, I'm in love with you. I think I have been since that first day, when you admitted you had no idea what you were doing and then tried anyway. And I know the farm isn't glamorous, and the money isn't great. But if you wanted to stay, we could figure it out. Together. I reached up and touched his face. This beautiful man who'd somehow seen something in me worth loving. You're in love with me? Completely, he said simply. Inconveniently. I laughed and pulled him down into a kiss. Against his lips, I whispered, I'm in love with you too. So much it scares me. So stay. Be scared here with me. And that's what I did. I called my boss and quit my job. I told my aunt I wanted to stay on and help her run the farm long term. She just smiled, like she'd known all along, and said she'd be happy to have me. Caspian and I moved into the main house together after she gave us her blessing, and we started building a life. It hasn't all been easy. There are people in town who don't understand or don't approve, and we've learned to be careful about how we present ourselves in certain spaces. But here on the farm, we can be exactly who we are. We work the land together, build something real together, and every day I'm grateful for that moment at the water trough, for the way he caught me when I was falling, for the courage we both found to be honest about what we felt. Sometimes in the evening, after the work is done, we'll go back to that old stone trough, and I'll splash him just to see him grin, and he'll grab me and pull me close, and we'll stand there in the golden light, water dripping off us, holding each other like we're the only two people in the world. And in those moments, I think about how different my life is now from what I thought it would be, and I can't imagine wanting anything else. I found love in the last place I expected, with a person who taught me what it means to be honest with yourself, to put your hands in the soil and trust that something beautiful will grow. And it did. We did.